What's up guys, Derek, moreplatesmartaids.com. Today we're going to be talking about microneedling and PGE2. So prostaglandin E2 is, if you've seen my other videos on castor oil, on PGD2 antagonist, you probably have some idea of what PGE2 is at this point. It's essentially the prostaglandin that promotes relaxation of tissues, as opposed to prostaglandin D2. PGD2 is more of the constriction of tissues, and this is why women, when they're trying to, induce labor, or people who need a laxative or something like that, they'll have a massive, for laxative effect, 15 milliliters of castor oil is common. For inducing labor, it's upwards of 60 milliliters, and then some women just get straight PGE2. So regardless if it's via castor oil or via straight PGE2, the outcome is trying to accomplish the relaxation of tissues, which in turn also could potentially relax tissues on the scalp that have been, constricted via this, inflammatory cascade of events after androgen receptor activation, whereby the hair follicle is essentially undergoes what many theorize to be hypoxia or, miniaturization, whereby the tissues around the hair follicle essentially constrict and kind of like, prevent it from growing properly. So this is why the theories around, why PGD2 is elevated in balding scalps and PGE2, there's not enough there and blah, blah, blah. It's, logically you would conclude, okay, well, PGE2, if I can just use more of it and I can put more PGE2 right on the tissue that needs it, then I can relax that tissue and allow for proper hair regrowth, which obviously a logical conclusion, which I had to test out, obviously. So the thing is there are protocols whereby people focus on a different area of the cascade of events that leads to the eventual, actual balding of the scalp. So some individuals who get side effects or just don't want to, go down that route will avoid 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, will avoid anti-androgens, will avoid anything else that kind of addresses the beginning of the cascade of events, and they'll try and hit some other area down the chain of events that leads to hair follicle miniaturization. And the thing is that chain of events is largely theoretical, based on, scalp biopsies and stuff, where we just see, oh, this bald guy had more PGD2 than the guy who's not balding, and there's a pattern because a lot of them do. And so obviously, new novel drug candidates are created out of this research on, biopsies of balding men, essentially, and what the composition of their scalp is, essentially. So I've talked about the PGD2 antagonist, but PGE2 in particular, while it's not going to necessarily prevent miniaturization, it could, in theory, like through the androgen pathway, in theory, if you can just load your scalp with enough PGE2 to completely offset the otherwise vasoconstriction, hypoxia, constriction of tissues via PGD2, or you have side effects from PGD2 antagonists, or whatever reason there's obviously different reasons people are going to come to choose one treatment or another. But anyways, in theory, you could apply the PGE2 to your scalp, relax the tissues, and mitigate that constriction effect that we hypothesize occurs. So in practical application, does this actually play out? Not to a significant enough degree for it to be the answer for most people, unfortunately. And on top of that, like I mentioned, when you start to push things into super physiological territory, first of all, PGE2 is impossible to dose in, like, the quantity is so small, the dosages, it's like literally microgram amounts. So you would have to have an extremely sensitive scale and be a very experienced, it's not like measuring stuff is that hard, but when you're dealing with such minuscule dosages, it's very difficult to be accurate. And even when I was trying this stuff, the dosage was so small that I was, at a point I was like, okay, whatever, I'm just gonna have to use a mega dose of this stuff, because there's no way I'm going to get the dosage I'm actually trying to get out of this, applying it in these tiny microgram quantities that I'm trying to. So I would end up using like 5 to 10 times higher the dosage than I needed on some occasions, or, being way off of where I'm trying to get, just because these quantities are so small that if you don't have like a compounding pharmacy available to you who's going to make it for you, or you don't have like pharma grade PGE2, then it's kind of like, you're sort of ballparking your dosage pretty significantly. So anyways, I probably use like 10 times the amount that people have thought is, have reported works well. On many occasions, I've used probably less, I've used the same, I've used way higher, I've pretty much done it all. And on top of that, I've also microneedled it in. So one of the most common protocols is you microneedle with like, whatever length you're doing. I did 1.5 millimeters. And then I would apply my PGE2 directly afterwards. And I also did it in conjunction with lithium too, because that was another part of one of the most common, prostaglandin approach protocols. And for me, I noticed no benefit from it personally, to be honest. My scalp would get very red and inflamed, which is a good sign that the, inflammatory response to the PGE2 was in fact occurring. However, was it actually promoting hair growth though? It didn't appear to be the case whatsoever, and I tried it for a while, and it didn't offset further loss. It didn't induce any like regrowth that, I think is superior to other, tried and true agents like minoxidil. I'm not a huge fan of minoxidil with that being said, but I'm just saying minoxidil is definitely more effective in that regard. It's also very cost prohibitive. PGE2 is very expensive, and especially when you're measuring these microgram quantities, you end up mixing way more than you need, and you end up spending way more in order to get your daily dose and whatnot. And I don't know, I just like didn't see a need. I didn't see it being a efficacious alternative for me if I was going to go the growth agonist pathway and I was willing to deal with something that is highly experimental and was like that potent in that regard. I would be going the minoxidil route. But frankly, in terms of attacking the prostaglandin pathway, my favorite way of doing it via PGE2 is still with castor oil, because your body then regulates how much the racinoleic acid, acts as an agonist of PGE2, and it sort of has like a regulatory process whereby if you were deficient in something, you at least have some mechanism of regulating where and how much the deficient tissues would get, I suppose, because it actually has to go through the body and be digested and go through the first pass and whatnot. So, but when it comes to a topical application of a drug like PGE2, you're bypassing everything and just mainlining it right to where you're trying to get it, which on paper sounds like a good idea if you're trying to, backfill an area that is otherwise PGE2 deprived. You just overload it, and then, you overpower the PGE2 and you just get insane regrowth. But in practical application, it doesn't seem to work that way. And it was a negligible effect, if any. I didn't notice anything beneficial from it whatsoever. And I was, aggressively microneedling, putting it in. It was definitely whatever it was doing, it was definitely getting in there and working, because my scalp would go like bright red after, like very, very irritated and inflamed. And obviously this is largely because of the jabbing needles in your scalp prior, but on top of that, it would get like another level of redness on top of that after applying it. And this is even when you're just suspending it in like distilled water. There's no like ethanol irritating the skin, no nothing. So anyways, it just, to me, it didn't work. So some people, they seem to, like, perhaps for somebody who is trying to have like very, very limiting side effects from like all other alternatives that hit the same pathway, which is very unlikely, like maybe it's worth exploring further in certain regards for some individuals. But for me and for like the majority of other people, I think oral castor oil was better in terms of PGE2 hitting that pathway, and it's way cheaper. It's at least has clinical data in humans we can reference in terms of oral ingestion, that we can actually see some sort of like, actual FDA has actually assessed its safety profile in certain dosages in terms of, toxicity and whatnot. There's just like, it's a no-brainer. Like, it's better results, way cheaper, actually been assessed for safety. Like, no one's assessing a mega dose of topical PGE2 that I've seen. So anyways, again, you should take that with a grain of salt. This is just my personal experience. The microneedling PGE2 lithium route didn't seem to do anything. And, but mainly talking about the PGE2. So as far as a growth agonist, I don't think it's really, worth pursuing. So anyways, that is my stance on it. So thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts, wherever I am. I highly recommend subscribing to the mailing list. First link in the description below as well, if you want to get notified whenever I publish an article, because those are more concise, professionally laid out, table of contents, have hyperlinks to all the clinical studies I reference in my videos that you would otherwise not see unless you got the article sent to you, and then you could delve into those further for your own personal research if you wished. So thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.